I've been taking my time. I feel like I'm out of my mind. It feel like my life ain't mine. I've been on the low, I've been taking my time.
Hi everyone, this is Project Mayday. This is Bree.
And G.
And we have Rod Hutchinson.
So Rod is a good friend of mine, and he's actually at the station. I can't really tell because of the background, but he's at the station, and he's graciously volunteered his time to come on the podcast and join us. He's got an incredible story. He's moved around a lot. He started off on the East Coast and came over onto the best coast, and he's got a story for you. He's an open book, and that's something I really appreciate about him. We've open, conversations, and hope to have one here. So without further ado, welcome, Rod.
Oh, hey guys! Thank you so much for having me. By the way, I'm honored to be here on your project, and I love the work you guys are doing. I'm honored, so thank you.
Yeah,
Great.
Absolutely.
So, Rod, let's dive in. How did you start in the fire service? Why were you interested in the fire service?
It was a combination of things. I think at the time I was young and I was moving around a lot, trying to figure out my place and what I wanted to do. I had graduated college, moved out to the coast. I'm originally from a city just north of Boston called Lowell, Massachusetts. And I went to college in Boston at an art school, actually, and majored in film and then eventually in marketing, and wanted to come out to the coast to be in Hollywood. I wanted to be a power agent. I was really hoping to be kind of like Ari Gold and Entourage and just run LA. Thankfully, that was awful. I was glorifying the worst parts about this city in my mind. So I did that for a couple of years and moved around a lot. I went to Texas for a year, lived in Austin, and when I was in Texas, that I got it in my head that fire was going to be my path. There was a few guys I was bartending with that had been talking about it, and I was like, I got to figure out what I'm going to do with my life, man. At the time, I was like 24, 25. I had lived in 3 different states. Tried this career, tried that career. Nothing was really fitting for me. That really give me purpose. You know what I mean? Like I felt like there were things I knew I wanted to do. I wanted to help people. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to do something that would fulfill me and not just make money. I mean, money is cool. Money is great, but something that wasn't going to make me want to just kill myself after living. I just being in a cubicle for the next 25 years, which I was doing for a little bit too. And I was like, I can't. So it got in my head to do the fire thing, and I just ran with it. I had to go back to Boston to look after my mother for a little bit, and after that, I decided to just go full on and do the fire thing hard, and move back out to California because I wanted to do it in California. I felt like that was the best place to be a firefighter. I didn't want to do it on the East Coast with the cold. I don't like cold. That's actually a large reason why I moved to California in the first place. I put in my time on the East Coast. At my home, I'll always say I'm from Boston. I'm the East Coast northerner to the core, but I'm done with the cold. Like,
so you moved to Southern California where it doesn't snow.
To do the fire thing, I was like, this is where I want to be. And I had some friends who were out here from the first time I moved there. So, came in hard. I got it in my mind to do fire when I was like 27, about that age. And
because you're 37 now, right?
37 now. Yeah, I've been on this. I'll be on 7 years in January. Gotcha. But yeah, my dad actually coincidentally was a firefighter for a private company for Shell Oil for 5 years, actually before I was born. And honestly, I didn't even know that when I decided to do the fire thing. That just happened to be a coincidence. And I was like, okay, well, maybe that's a sign. But yeah, honestly, it was really just me being young and trying to figure out what would be a best fit for me. And I felt like for my demeanor, for my sense of duty, for my sense of wanting to make a difference and help people, it just made sense. And I thought I would be good at it. So I went hard. I went hard when I was to California and never looked back. It took me 3 years to get hired. So like I said, I got in my head when I was 27. And I got on with Pasadena Fire, which is my first department that I'm still with now, when I was 30.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I've been here with them.
And it's one thing I picked up on what you said. You said something about, it wasn't about the money or it's not about the money. And that's absolutely true. Money's a byproduct, not an end product, right? And so right. I think that's something that needs to be highlighted that, we don't get into this because of that. We get into it because we have a love for making a change.
So just a question. Do you think there's anything you wish someone would have told you before getting into the fire service that would have helped your career?
Good question. Something that they would have told me. Well, specifically, I think being a firefighter here, there's not as much of the fire as I would have thought at the beginning. I love that we do have a good amount of action and that we still do see fires semi-regularly. But honestly, it's a good thing because especially being in California, prevention is becoming great. It's just getting better and better as years progress. It's a city that a lot of us, especially in the newer buildings, are all sprinklers. They have great alarm systems, a lot of things. So it's becoming less of our primary concern. I mean, I know G will know. You can tell 80% of our calls are medical related. You know what I mean? Those tones go off 80% of the time. It's not a fire. That's not something that I was told at the beginning.
Because you watch Backdraft like me. You watch Backdraft, and that's how you got in it.
Of course. And I thought every time it was going on, like every time it was game time. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily like that, which is fine. I just had to you had to reevaluate the focus and like what we're here for and what we do a little bit, but also be ready for the worst case scenario, be ready for that big fire that you're wishing to come. But I personally would love it if we had more of that, just to be able to do it more, because you get better when you do things more. You know what I mean? The fact that we have less and less fires, that means we have less opportunity to see fires and to know what to do in these certain situations. Like I know I've been on 7 years now going on, and I mean, I've only seen a handful of really good fires in the time that I've been on. It's not like it was back in the day. A lot of these old guys will talk about how you burn like totally continuously, and these salty guys, man, that just like can look at a building and tell you exactly what's going on, where the fire is, how to do it, how to knock it down, all that stuff, and that's great. But a lot of that experience nowadays, unfortunately, isn't there just because we just don't get as much fire, and that's.
But those old stories that they tell you, just take it with a grain of salt, man. They're fibbed.
Well, and I think it's good to talk about your Pasadena fire, and you're in a big city, and obviously we know our state is on fire every fire season, which seems to never end. But a lot of it's wildland fire, and so I think that's a good distinction. We're talking structure versus wildland fire, and it's very different for the state of California.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's only getting worse. I mean, I don't tell you guys how it went down this year. We had crews out, I think it was like a couple months straight. We had at least one crew out fighting one fire or another this fire season, and which is up from even last year. And last year was awful. So it's like every year it's getting progressively worse, and we're getting progressively more busy, and the fire seasons are getting progressively larger. And it's a pretty rough state of affairs out here, especially in California. It keeps going.
And something that's interesting about you, man, is you spent a lot of time out in the East Coast. You graduated college there, right? And so I think the difference between East Coast fire and West Coast fire, because you have been out there for an extensive amount of time. Could you speak to that a little bit? What do you think is the difference? I mean, yes, wildland. However, what about the culture?
The culture, man. I mean, the East Coast is still very. I guess I'm trying to think of a light way to say this. It's got a lot of traditions, right? I mean, like the fire service in general does, but a lot of their traditions, especially those on the East Coast, are based in some pretty backwards thinking as far as race. As far as class, as far as nepotism, that kind of stuff. I mean, a lot of that stuff is rampant. You're talking about FDNY, you're talking about Boston Fire, you're talking about a lot of white faces, and there has been traditionally and historically, and not a lot of, I guess, not a lot of acceptance for change. I've noticed that. I mean, you can even see that here. I think that we're resistant to change in so many ways. We do things because we've been doing them, and we want to keep doing them because that's tradition, that's history. And I'm of the mindset, like, I love the idea of history. I love tradition. I think to an extent they have their value, but also I think it's important to be adapted to change. I mean, there's a certain point where, like, you don't just keep doing something because that's what your dad did, what your granddad did, and that's the way we do it. You have to ask, okay, why? Why have we been doing this way? Is there a better way to do this? Is there a more fair way? Is there a way that's more inclusive to what we see in the changing times? And you're asking what the difference is between East Coast and West Coast. You don't. I see a lot of that is stunted in the East Coast. I think even so to this day. I know a couple of guys in Boston Fire, and the culture at the table, things that are talked about, is still very much rooted in a bigoted tradition. And I didn't want to be a part of that. That actually was another reason why I didn't stay on the East Coast as well too. Outside of the cold, I don't like the cold. I'm through with it. But also the mindset, a lot of the mindset of those cities and the cultures, I thought pretty toxic to this day.
Do you think it would have been harder for you to get hired as a black male firefighter on the East Coast versus the West Coast?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
It really is hard to say. I'm not going to really say one way or the other. There would definitely be challenges, on the East Coast. I know the culture. I know Boston culture. I know that, it's like it has a very Irish run feel to the entire city, and to a lot of things that they do is based in a tradition that is very much based in that culture, and then I'm not a part of a lot of that culture.
So it was harder for you to relate, obviously, not coming from that. I mean, I am Irish on top of other things. And I get that whole tradition, the nepotism, where it's my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my father, all were CHP. So it was like, are you going to do it? And I'm like, I don't want to. This is probably a really bad career choice for me. So I get that whole idea of generational commitment to basically the career field. I think that's a really good point. What advice would you give someone who would have been in your position joining the fire department?
What advice I would give? Don't give up. This is a hard road to follow, and a lot of people get burnt out on getting that. I've seen it. There are people that I went to my college academy with that have been testing and taking classes and doing all of these things, and for whatever reason, where they just don't interview very well, or they just don't really take tests as well, for whatever reason. It can take a long time. I know people have taken 7+ years. I was fortunate in that it took me only 3, but it can be a discouraging process just to get hired. And then once you're there, you have to really decide if it's for you. I've also seen that. We've seen a couple of guys come and go. They'll do this, and they can get into the culture. They see that it's not something that they can deal with for the next 30 years of their life, which is totally understandable as well too. I would say do the best you can to immerse yourself in the world before you commit to it. Do your right, talk to people, and we're always firefighters love talking about themselves, again, in their process and all that stuff. So as someone that's really interested in doing this job, like, try the best you can to immerse yourself and get a really good handle on what it means to do this job. Yeah. Because it isn't backed up. Like, it isn't the TV shows. It isn't Rescue Me, all that junk. Like, it's not. There's a lot of things that are under the surface that you don't see, that we don't tell you. Why we're here today talking about mental health. That's huge, man, and that's another thing that isn't addressed so much because of the culture. We don't talk about these things. Right? We have bad calls, and you just go to the next one.
Yeah. So you have been, immersed in it for a bit now, and you're planning on staying for 30 years and whatnot. And so, you and I have talked, and Bree have talked offline about, how it's affected you so far, and you're open to talking about, your relationship with Amber and girlfriend of six years. We don't know why you haven't put a ring on it yet, but we'll get to that.
Talk about it.
But yeah, so dive into that a little bit. Open up about your relationship and how it's it got affected by, the career choice that you've chosen.
Right. For what I'll back up a little bit. For me, getting involved in this world, in this subculture, this job, another reason I felt like I was suited for it is because of the way that I grew up and the way I was raised. I was raised by a very strong woman. She's a Southerner. She is a baby boomer. I didn't mention I grew up in Massachusetts, just north of Boston, but my entire extended family was also in New York on both sides of my family. So all my brothers and sisters, my cousins, both of my parents are all from New Orleans. My mother moved to Boston when she was pregnant with me. So I'm the only one that's a Northerner, right? So my mother is a tough Southerner. My dad wasn't around. She raised me to be very strong and unaffected, and I have like an extremely thick skin when it comes to I guess people getting close to me having to deal with the awful, blows that life are going to throw at you. And I mean, she raised a black man on her own. Like that's not easy. And especially coming from somebody who, my mother grew up being white only. I mean, not my grandmother, my mother. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that's when she was 12 years old, she remembers seeing that as a little girl. So she's raising a man on her own and a black man in a pretty hostile world and environment. So she had to teach me to be unaffected, to not, let a lot of the bullshit in and let it hurt me. So that's the way that I am and have been as far as I can remember. So I felt like that would be good being in this job because in a lot of ways you have to be kind of unaffected. You have to be able to take the blows. You have to be able to see the things that you can't unsee. You're going to have to take a lot of the adversity that we're going to see from day to day and just deal, right? So that's what I've been doing, which I think has made me a pretty effective firefighter. Like I said, I do have the ability to see something awful that most people in this world will never have to see in their life, and then go eat lunch, and I can do that, not really, be too affected by it. I think in large part because of the way that I was growing up. Which is great for certain aspects of what I do, but not necessarily so great when it comes to things like letting people in your life and cultivating a good relationship that is based on openness and trust. And honestly, that has been, I think to this day, probably our biggest difficulties, our biggest hurdle is the fact that I am not emotionally, I guess, at her level in a lot of ways. Just because I just don't open up that way. And I'm in a lot of ways, I'm emotionally closed off. By choice, I guess, to a point. But also, I think just by nurture. So that's just the way that I was confident in a hard world, that I wasn't able to just trust people into my circle. If you're in my circle, it's taking a lot of work to get it. And even then, I probably you won't see things. I don't cry. I'm not a crier. Like there was no crying in my mother's house growing up. Like, there was no, you better dry those tears because nobody out there is going to care about your tears. You have to do you have to pick yourself up and you have to figure out how to fix yourself because that's not going to happen out there.
Okay. So no crying, right? Boys don't cry. Right. Okay. Right. So let's start the conversation about, you've talked about how it's been kind of hard. We just talked about how you're a little emotionally unavailable to your 6-year relationship with Amber. And that's been kind of a number one issue in your relationship. But what is one of the hardest calls that you've dealt with? And then how did you deal with it?
Right. The one that sticks in my mind the most, I would have to say, is one that was dealing with a child, which I feel like is a common thing. The worst calls that you deal with always if they have to do with kids, are going to be, exponentially bad. This particular call was a drowning. We got 2 residents. That the story basically was that the dad went for a jog. Mom fell asleep on the couch. And when she woke up, the 2-year-old baby girl was floating face down in the pool. So we arrived on scene, and the baby she was already out of the porch with the baby. The baby was already blue, and not breathing. And we started CPR, worked the head up. There was ran a full arrest call on the 2-year-old. Never got pulses. And I remember specifically, I think that the one thing that sticks in my mind the most about this call was the mother. She was just like a 3-mile stare in this like catatonic state. We couldn't get any information out of her. She was just sitting there, just numb, no, not crying, not saying a word, just staring. And that I was like, oh shit, this is it. So, but we did our job. We never got pulses back. We later found out that the kid didn't make it, which is sad. But that's part of it. I mean, like, you're gonna get calls like that. So what else do I remember about this call? So yeah, the thing that affected me, I think, the most was the fact that I wasn't as affected as I felt like I should be, and that kind of scared me. I guess because like this is not a routine call. You have routine calls, you even have routine deaths. We go on all the time. Older people or whatever. That's fine. I can deal with that all day. But I knew that this was different. You know what I mean? Like, you don't, like, a call, losing a 2-year-old is not an everyday thing. And I knew that I should feel appropriately awful about it, right? But I didn't feel, it didn't like hit me. Maybe I wasn't just ready to go, and it just didn't hit me like I thought it should, which hit me. The fact that it didn't hit me. I was like, man, am I like numb? Am I an unfeeling person? Like, am I just not able to feel? But and to this day, I don't dream about it. I don't think about it. I only think about it now because you happen to ask. And I think the next day, I had to like force myself to cry. Like I said, I'm not a crier, but I felt like I needed to. You know what I mean? I felt like I needed to. I was looking for an opportunity to like find a way to like let some of this out, because I was like, I knew this was bad. I knew, it was an awful thing. And this is what did it. So the little girl was it was an Asian family, a very cute little Asian toddler, the one that passed away. And we went on call the next day, and it was at Caltech. I was working in that district, and we went on a young girl who had been having like a stomach ache, and it was like a pretty 19-year-old like Asian girl, and for some reason, like, I made the connection that like that could have been this kid. Like, this kid could have grown up to be a genius at Caltech, and I was like, holy shit, like, that was a life that we'll never know about. And then I was like, okay, I'm starting to get that. I think I'm ready to cry. And I went back to the station, and I closed the door, and I was like, okay, I'm going to think hard about this because I want to like let it go. And I squeezed out a couple tears, and that was it. And that's probably the worst call that I've had. I don't know if it's a weird gift or something like that I can do that. I don't know if it's detrimental to me that I am not able to feel more. But the way I look at it is that like we're there to mitigate an emergency that we didn't cause. There's something happened that we had nothing to do with, and we're going to do the very best we can to assist in everything we can. We have at our ability to do, and that's what we did. We all did our job. We performed high quality CPR. We ran the full code, but there was nothing that we could have done to bring that kid back. Yeah. So that makes me comfortable, and the fact that I did my job and we did the very best we could, and that was just something out of our hands. So that's kind of how I live, but that's just me. I don't know how other people deal with it. I do remember this when we got back into the rig after that call. Our captain at the time turned back at us. I never forget how he phrased this. He goes, "So we have a program to talk about, especially particularly difficult and traumatic calls like this one. We have a program in place where you can go and talk about it. You're gonna have a session with a counselor to really talk about it, so people can stay with it." And he turned around to us. Our crew was like, "Hey, okay, so everyone's good." I was like, "You guys don't need to talk to anybody about this, do you? You guys are good?"
He answered it for you.
Yeah, it was a very leading way in the way that he answered, because we don't do that. He's like, we have this in place. We appreciate it. We respect it, but we're not gonna use it unless you want to use it. Do you want to use it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's one of those like things. I was like, oh, I wasn't going to anyway, but now I'm definitely not going to if you're going to phrase it like that.
And that's the culture, that you were speaking about. That's the culture. That needs to change. When you become a captain, which I hope you inspire to do one day, that's where you affect that change. Your crew is going to, if you do, God forbid, you do have another drowning when you're a captain, you can be like, hey, we're going to this.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was an old school captain too. He was from the old school. He was like, he's been around for a while, and I think he's affected by his culture. Like I was saying earlier before, like people are affected by tradition and culture and what they've always known, what they've always done.
Yeah.
And you're right, that needs to change. We're evolving people, we're evolving times, and that needs to just change.
Yeah.
Especially with things like this. You guys we're taking the first steps right now to be talking about this.
Absolutely. And you talk about a drowning. That's my worst call too. Was a drowning. But for mine, it was 2 11-month-olds in the bottom of a pool. And 1 is unimaginable. 2 is just you can't even fathom. Having 2 in one call, and it was 2 twins. And it was the same thing. The captain did the same thing. We got in the engine. And he was like, nobody needs to talk about anything, right? We good? I was like, yeah, we're good, man. We're good. And then I was actually dating someone at that time, and then she kind of felt the wrath. Not the wrath. I wasn't angry. It was just she felt all the emotions from that call. She felt it in the relationship. So how did Amber, feel about that? When did you come home with it?
Yeah, I told her right away. Actually, we were on and off for a while. The last these 6 years that we've been together, we spent periods of time where we were broken up. That period of time when that happened, we actually weren't together anymore. But we would still keep in touch. And I did text her. I was like, okay, so my worst nightmare call just happened. I lost a child. I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I'm pretty sure I'm okay. I don't think I need to talk about it. She said, well, do you need to talk to me? I know at that point we hadn't talked for a month or 2. Like I said, we were broken up. She's like, do you need to talk? Because I'm here for you, obviously. I was like, I think I'm all right. I was like, I think I'm good. I'm not, I don't feel, like I'm floored. I feel like, something that just happened. So yeah, but I think, it has to go somewhere. You're right. When you see things that people aren't meant to see, like I say, like to think that I'm hard, that, I got all these walls up, but everyone's
with that call, something that really stood out to me that you were saying is that you were thinking, I'm supposed to be sad. Why am I not sad? And that you forced and squeezed out a few tears alone in your room because you felt like it was appropriate. So, I find it really interesting that you were saying that your number one relationship problem is that you're not able to fully connect and trust and be very vulnerable and open and intimate, right? All those trigger words of feeling really insecure, essentially, right? How do I trust you? How do I love you? How do you love me? And then on the opposite, you have this horrible call and you feel nothing. Do you think that those 2 situations are related?
Yeah, I'm sure they are. I think that's just part of my defenses. I'm able to flip that switch and shut down pretty easy, but bringing that drawbridge back up is way more difficult of a process. Yeah. It's been a difficult process for Amber. We go to therapy regularly. I'm thankful for that, which also is a thing traditionally growing up that isn't, a very common thing in the Black culture, in the Black community. We don't do that. We don't talk to strangers about our problems. I still to this day probably wouldn't tell my mother that I'm in therapy just because I know what her response is, even though I know how much it helps.
Spoiler alert, buddy. She's going to listen to this.
Mom, I'm in therapy. Deal with it.
Okay, so I was just going to ask you, have you ever sought out help? So you're in therapy.
Oh yeah. I think that Amber and I see a therapist together. We go regularly, and I think therapy has been a godsend for us in our relationship, especially. It's helped us communicate so much better. It's like preventative maintenance. I always tell people this, like that. We do preventative maintenance for so many things, especially in the fire station. We take our engines in for PMs all the time. We do this for our equipment. We make sure that they're running properly, but nobody decides to do that for a marriage or for a relationship until things are broken. Which I never really, and it makes sense when you think about it now. It's like the best thing to do is to address problems before they become real problems, which is, getting them out there, getting that communication level. So we do that. We definitely sit down with the therapist regularly, and we hash out a lot of things. I address the problems that I know that I have and that she has, and my barriers with opening up emotionally.
And do you think you think it's been helping?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I think I've grown. I've evolved in the short couple of years that we've been talking to the therapist that we were with. I think it's saved our relationship on many occasions. Like I said, we've been on and off in our relationships for years now, and this is the longest stretch of time that we've been together without any breaks. Coincidentally, it's been the only time during our relationship where we've been in therapy, and I think there's a correlation with that.
Absolutely.
Has your job ever been a topic of a therapy session?
Yes, all the time. We talk about my job all the time. Not even just like the job and the college. We talk about the culture, the people. So much of my time is spent here. It's like it's a legitimate second home, and I work a lot. I pick up a lot of overtime shifts. I end up being here probably half, if not more, of the time that I spend awake and not awake are here. And a lot. So you have to deal with the people, the guys that I work with, the culture, the things that you hear, the way that people act. That's a big part of it. Is really just the culture of it. I think.
No, I can definitely attest to that because I actually came down and saw Justin took us to 31, the one that's in downtown the station. Yeah, and when I walked in there, I was like, "This is a firehouse. Like this is the culture there." I mean, you guys had I forget his name, but he's been there for like 40 something years. He's gonna die there. What's his name? Engineer.
The engineer, yeah, he's talking about homes.
Yeah, and he was there, and there was it's a truck engine box house, so it was a bunch of people there. And then when I walked in, I was like, man, this is a firehouse. This is amazing. Now, I mean, it attests to the fact that you had, we have Nick on. Nick spoke about his stuff. You're coming on and speaking, and Justin's going to come on. So it's like there's a culture with Pasadena that's evolving, or trying to break the culture of being tough and just shutting up and not saying what's on your mind and talking about it. So why do you think Pasadena's so open, or what is it doing?
I think well, for one, we're extremely diverse. I think that is a huge plus for us. Especially one of my closest friends, who's also a Pasadena firefighter, came from Oxnard before coming to here. And he was, I think, the only, if not maybe one more other person of color on the entire department, which is crazy. And you're thinking, like, this is my only department I've been on. This is all I know is Pasadena Fire. So I look around and think this is the way it goes everywhere. And it's not.
No.
It's not. I mean, but I don't know. But we're extremely diverse as far as, people of color. We have a plethora of female firefighters at all different ranks. And it's great to see. So it's like I guess in some ways, are forced to modernize, and to get on, which is great. Sometimes you need a push, you need a force, because there's so much of a remnant of a lot of the old culture and the old ways that's still here in so many ways. And some of it is okay to hold on to, and a lot of it is not. Like there's a lot of things that are said and done that I don't even like being a part of. I mean, I don't like the mindset around a lot of things that are just traditionally accepted. And I think those are things that need to change and break. And it starts with, things like this, just talking, having conversations. But it's a slow process, but it is happening, and you can tell. And I think it's happening here in Pasadena.
Absolutely.
Glad to be a part of it.
Well, I'm very happy to hear that you have so many female firefighters, since 95% of fire is male. So I'm very happy to hear that. That's great.
Yeah. So
and they meet their own, extreme levels of adversity when they're here too, even here. Because there's so much expected. They can't just be here; they have to be great here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is like a lot. The same kind of eyes that I feel like I still have on myself here. Too. It's like I can't just come here and coast. You have to, because I have so much responsibility to, I guess, be in their club that I was never in before. So if I'm gonna be here, you better be good. You can't just be average.
Yeah, that's amazing. So Rod, this is how we kind of end things here. We have a thing called rapid fire. So are you up for it?
I'm down.
All right. He's got his game face on. Cool. So the rule is you have 5 questions, and you have to answer them in one word or one phrase. That's it. You got to come up with them quick. Nick didn't get that concept. He was kind of thinking about them. So let's see if you can top his. He had some good answers though. So remember, the rule is one word or one phrase.
One word, one phrase. I'll do the best I can.
Okay. Number 1, if you could have dinner with any person, dead or alive, who would it be?
James Baldwin.
Okay. Number 2, how would you spend an ideal fake sick day?
He's already done it.
Vegas.
Pandemic or pre-pandemic? Okay. Number 3, what is your least favorite chore at the firehouse?
Toilet?
Yeah, I would agree, actually.
Yeah.
Number 4, on a scale 1 to 10, how weird are you?
Oh, 8.
Solid.
That was pretty quick.
Yeah.
All right, last one. What is one word to describe yourself?
Loyal.
Okay. I like that.
Interesting career choice.
Hey, Rod, again, thank you so much for coming on, buddy. I know you're at work, so it's taking time away from your sleep, which you definitely need.
Safety naps.
Safety naps, yeah. But again, thank you so much. And you're a man of powerful words, and we definitely would love to have you back on. But again, I learned a lot from you just listening, buddy, and it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a pleasure. I love the work that y'all are doing. Please keep it up. This is a conversation that needs to continue. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, this is Project Mayday.
Call out.